Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to see you for this last Shabbat of 2023. And boy, what a year it has been, and boy, how I will not miss it. All right, we're going to begin with candle lighting, but before we do, as usual, hello to our friends joining us online in cyberspace, and hello to all of you who came out tonight. To remind everyone, if you need to use the restroom, they're out the door in the hallway on the other side of the social hall. And if you need to go outside, there's a door there and a door there and over there. Any questions? Okay. May I ask if there's anyone who would like to come up and light candles, especially if you have a yard site this week? Page 1 in your blue books. Please rise.
Amen.
You may be seated. We will continue with Lechu Neranana on page 10.
Our call to participate. Lechu Neranana, let's go. Come on in. There's a word in here. It's Nariah. And it calls for you to shout it out. So I'm going to cue you. When I say the word Nariah, I want you to echo it right back to me. It goes like this. Lechu Neranana L'Adonai. Lechu Neranana L'Adonai. Here we go. Naria, Naria, Litzur Yeshenu Nikadma, Fana Bitoda. Again, Naria, Litzur Yeshenu Nikadma, Fana Bitoda. Bismirod Naria Lo, Lechu Niranina. L'Adonai Lechu Niranina L'Adonai. Again, Naria Litzu Yeshenu Nikanma Fana Bitoda. Naria Litzu Yeshenu Nikanma Fana Bitoda. Bismirod Naria Lo, Bismirod Naria Lo, Bismirod Naria Lo.
We'll continue with Lechado D on 18.
18. Sorry.
Oh, verses 1, 3, 5, and 9.
Lechadoli, Lekrat Kala, Pene Shabbat Nikavela. Lechadoli, Lekrat Kala, Pene Shabbat Nikavela. Shamo vezachor, Bedibur Echad Hishmianu, El Hamyuchad Adonai Echad. Ushmo echad l'shem multiferet v'lehitila lechadoli lekrat kahala pene Shabbat nikavela lechadoli lekrat kahala pene Shabbat nikavela mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzei mitov hafecha harav lach shevet b'yemecha b'cha v'chu yachamot alaheichem la lechadoli lekrat kahala pene Shabbat nikavela lechadoli lekrat kahala pene Shabbat nikavela. Hitorari, hitorari, kiva orech, kumi ori, uri, uri, shir daberi, kevod Adonai, alayik nikla, lechadodi, lekarat kahala, pene Shabbat nikabela, lechadodi, lekarat kahala, Pene Shabbat Nikabel. We rise to greet the Shabbos bride. Boi v'shalom ater bala gam besimcha uvtala toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, boi chala. Lechatodi, lekarat kahala, pene Shabbat nikabela. Let me hear you. Oh yeah. Asher Koach. Very good.
Please remain standing through the next bit and then Baruch Hu. So we're going to continue with Chatzi Kaddish on 22.
Yitkadav yitkadash shmei rabba.
Amen.
Ve'alma divra ki yutev yamlech malchutei
B'chayechonu uvyomechon uvchayedecho bet Yisrael Bagala, bagala ובזמן קריב.
ואמרו
אמן. יש מרבה מבורך, לעולם ולעלמיה יתברך.
יתברך וישתבח, יתבהר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר, ויתעלה ויתהלל. שמי לקודשה
ברכו
לעילמים, כל ברכתה ושירתה.
תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה.
ואמרו
Amen. Baruch Hu on 23. Le'olam va'ed. You may be seated. Please join us in reading on 25 in English. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are the creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Sevaot is your name, ever-living God. May you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, God, who brings on the evening.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים. תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב ערבים.
Amen. 27.
עבד
Olam Beit Yisrael,
עמך אהבת, תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת. על כן אדוני אלוהינו, בשכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נהיה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Please rise for Shema on page 29.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta
Et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavecha, uv'chol nafshecha, uv'chol meodecha, v'hayu ha'devarim ha'ele, asher anochi mitzavecha, hayom al levavecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לו תותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. 37, page 37.
Yay day day day, yay day 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 day, yay day 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 day, yay day 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 day, yay day day day, yay day 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 day, yay day day day, yay day day day. Mi chamocha Bailim Adonai, mi kamocha, nedar bakodesh, norat tehilo, osei felep, norat tehilo, osei felep. Yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai. Yay day yay day yay yay day day yay day yay day 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 yay day yay day 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 yay day yay day yay day day yay day day. Malchut karavanecha boker yam lifnei Moshe ze Eli anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch leolam vai v'ne'emar kifad Adonai et Yaakov v'galo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael.
Page 39.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechayim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leShalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechayim u'shmor tzeiteinu Uvoenu Refetim Shalom Me'ata v'ad olam. Baruch ata Adonai Hapores Sukat Shalom Aleinu v'al kol Amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim v'al kol Yoshvei Tevel.
We will continue now with the jumping song, but first we need the young people in the room in the back. If they'd like to come out, we're going to do the jumping song. Vishamru 41, please rise and be careful of your knees. I am now at that age. 41.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. בני ובן בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית העולם. כי Sheshet yamin asa Adonai et hashamayim et haaretz ve'shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledoratam beri'olam uvayom hashvi Shabbat vaynafash Shabbat vaynafash Shabbat vaynafash Shamru b'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledoratam beri'olam.
We will now take a few moments for silent introspection. Starting on page 43, you may use the words in Hebrew or English, or you may use this time for meditation. If you have finished your Amidah, you may be seated. If you're still talking to God, please continue at your own pace.
Shalom bimrama, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru amen.
It is now time for us to share the names of those in need of healing. If you have names to share, I invite you to do so at this time. Deborah's mom, and Sherry Krause, of course, and all of those, and Hinda Batsura and Sora Leah, and all those in our society who are in need of shelter or health care on this chilly winter evening. Misha Berach, page 63.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mikor HaBracha L'imotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Li'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Our people observed a major holiday this past week. Does anyone know what it was? It was movie night. It was Chinese food and movie night. Now, there are many folks in this community who are celebrating or have celebrated Christmas with family, and we hope that it was a wonderful and special occasion for all of you. In our house, we decided to do something that we wanted to do up in LA, but we never managed to figure out how to make the timing work, which was on Christmas Eve. Has anyone ever been to the Lemley on Christmas Eve? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? There is a Fiddler on the Roof sing-along on Christmas Eve. Now, I've seen Fiddler at Segerstrom Hall, starring Topol. I've seen the video of the Purim spiel from last year, but somehow I had made it to almost 40 years old without ever having viewed the film all the way through in its entirety. I know, shocking, right? I tried a few times when I was young, but my grandmother intervened because the subject matter is a little challenging for a small child. But as an adult, I was brought to see it at Segerstrom. To refresh your memory, if you need refreshing, there might be one person here or two who might. The story takes place around 1905, and the Jews living in the Pale of Settlement in Russia are being brutalized and expelled through pogroms and edicts. And a branch of my own family traces its immigration to the United States to this period. Throughout the story, the main character is followed around by a mad fiddler, representing a downturn in fortune. Tevye, played by the legendary actor Chaim Topol, explains that we are an eternally persecuted people teetering on the edge of falling off of the roof and breaking our necks, like the eponymous fiddler. So I was surprised to discover that the situation for Jews in Russia had been relatively stable, indeed upwardly mobile, until the end of the reign of Tsar Alexander II, when he was assassinated. And does anyone know? That was a different Tsar. This is Alexander II in 1881. And unfortunately, this Tsar, who was considered to be permissive and progressive by Tsar standards, was assassinated by a group of revolutionaries prominently featuring a Jew named Hesia Helfman. And she was involved in the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. And Alexander II's son, Alexander III, reversed all of his father's tolerant views towards Jews who had been moving to St. Petersburg and getting educated and dressing and assimilating and joining Russian culture, and he reversed all of that. And he confined the Jews to the Pale, what was called the Pale of Settlement, only certain specific areas that we could live, and introduced something called the May Laws. Does anyone know what the May Laws are? They're pretty nasty laws, discriminatory laws against Jews. Now, I've always been slightly confused by the message of Fiddler on the Roof. Perhaps it's because there is no fiddler in the original Shalom Aleichem stories. The fiddler comes from, does anyone know? No. Do you know where the image is drawn from? Anybody?
Chagall.
All right, I have a ringer. The image is a Marc Chagall work, and you can see a fiddler sitting on a roof, and this idea was borrowed and combined with the stories of Shalom Aleichem and turned in, and they were sort of knitted together into what we know as Fiddler on the Roof. But in the same way that The Lion King is Hamlet with a happy ending, Fiddler on the Roof is the Tevye the Milkman stories, but with certain alterations. I should mention that I consider this to be one of the central texts of American Judaism, Fiddler on the Roof. So I approach this with great trepidation. In Fiddler on the Roof, there's no place for the assimilated or intermarried or politically active Jews in the town of. Thank you. Being politically active only brings danger to the Jews. Perchik, the communist agitator, is in the film partially responsible for the attacks against the Jews of Anatevka. It is considered to be retaliation, the end of the film. But when we as Jews watch this musical, we are spared some of the brutality of this period that my family remembers in our repressed trauma. And also for non-Jews who go to Fiddler and who sing along at the Lemli, as I was mentioning, it is an illustration of us as Jews as the eternally suffering people. We are forced to flee from place to place, and we are happy to salt our Shabbos dinner with our tears. Indeed, at the end of the film, in the song Anatevka, never did the Shabbos taste so sweet as when salted with their tears. And so, for non-Jews watching this musical, the Jews are non-threatening and much easier to understand than the modern assimilated American Jew. And even more confusing for non-Jews watching this film is the Israeli Jew, who looks and sounds and acts very little like the Jews of Anatevka. We Jews are supposed to be the victims in every situation. In this week's Torah portion, Vayechi, the story picks up around the death of the patriarch Jacob. Jacob is in Egypt and he is surrounded by all of his children, and although he had feared his son Joseph was dead, Jacob states that he is overjoyed that God has permitted him to reunite not only with Joseph, but to see Joseph's children, Ephraim and Manasseh. That would be Jacob's grandchildren. And so Jacob invites Joseph to bring the two boys forward for a blessing before he dies, as you do in the Torah and in most operas. And so the two boys come forward, and Jacob reaches out to put his hands on their heads. And does anyone remember, for extra credit, what he does? Ah, that's right. He crosses his hands and puts Judaism favors the right-hand side, just like Latin. Does anyone know what it's called in Latin? Dexter and sinister, right? So we favor the right hand. So he puts his right hand on the younger son, which is very much preferring the younger son to the older son, which is exactly what happened in his case. We might remember a few weeks ago we read about Jacob being victimized by and stealing the birthright of his repressive, muscular older brother. The Midrash suggests that we as Jews prefer brain over brawn, to use our heads, which is why Esau, Jacob's brother, is described in the Torah as a big, hairy, violent brute. And he is also considered by the Midrash, by our exegesis, what we would call rabbinic fan fiction, he is considered to be the progenitor of, does anyone know which nation he is the progenitor of? The Edomites, but then later, after the Edomites, one of Judaism's most challenging and repressive people that conquered us. Later, earlier than Islam, later than the Amalekites, later than Alexander the Great. You're missing the biggest empire, most famous empire in the world, the Romans. That's right. Jacob, the brainy, thoughtful, sensitive kid. The Jews being victimized by the Romans, oppressing and destroying our temple and so on. And the pattern of the younger sibling overtaking the older sibling, this kind of fantasy that we have of overtaking our oppressors. We see it again and again in the Torah. Isaac overtakes Ishmael. Moses overtakes Aaron. Solomon overtakes his brother Adoniah. That's not in the Torah, though. That's later. Over and over again, we see the younger, wiser child outwitting and overtaking the older child. This is hard for me to read because I am the oldest sibling in my family. In her book, The Trauma of the Gifted Child, the noted psychologist Alice Miller explains that parents can imprint negative behavior patterns and indeed crippling fears on their children, passing trauma from one generation to the next. If the parents view themselves as victims, the children will pick this up through our behavior and even without needing to be told. And they will carry it in themselves, in their posture, in the way they act in the world without necessarily realizing they are doing so. And this can create a dissonance between reality and someone's self-perception. Alice Miller explains that a family needs to create what she calls a stop generation. That is a generation that examines itself and the myths and stories it tells about itself that have been passed from parents to children and so on, in order to check that there's still an honest assessment of the world around you. And this way, we don't live in dissonance with the world around us if we do this kind of thoughtful reflection. And that way we can avoid carrying out patterns where we become victimized, or we become oppressive, or we become whatever it is that we're not aware we are doing. In most psychology manuals and in a psychologist's office, this is represented by a human being covering their eyes with their own hands, not wanting to look at the way that they're acting. Now in Fiddler on the Roof, the Jews are driven out of Anatevka. The final scene closes with the idea that the Jews have always been persecuted and have always fled from place to place, which for us rings true and also rings true for people who are looking at us from the outside. But Tevye at the very end is played off stage by the fiddler, who looks very much like the plague man from medieval drawings. He's gaunt. He kind of leans, you remember it from, he kind of staggers like a corpse. And in medieval art, the bubonic plague was represented by a skeleton or a sort of zombie that walks like that. It's a kind of callback to that art. He is a harbinger of death to come. And the characters hope that when they get to the Golden Medina, to America, where there are no cats, I'm sorry, that's another film, When they get to America, perhaps they will be freed from the perpetual cycles of violence. But the viewer, that is all of us, know that that is not true, because Tevye is followed off stage at the end by the fiddler, representing the difficulties that we faced trying to integrate into this society here, and possibly a reference to what will happen to the Jews of Europe a few decades later. It is through repeating these stories that we can sometimes create self-fulfilling prophecies. I believe that Fiddler on the Roof is one of our people's most beloved texts, our most beloved sacred stories that we tell ourselves. But it is only through a deep and honest examination of our most beloved stories and the behavior patterns that those stories accept as normal that we will be able to be a stop generation and not unduly pass on trauma from one generation to the next. And I would be willing to wager, if you are willing to discuss with me the authorship and the politics of the Torah, that you might say I might dare to approach an even holier text, Fiddler on the Roof. The reality of Jews in the Russian Empire was complex. We experienced periods of peaceful assimilation as well as persecution. And if you've ever seen photographs of them, there are some synagogues in Imperial Russia where the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, was fashioned in the shape of the imperial double eagle. Just like we have the flags. We have one flag, we're missing the other flag. Is it over there behind the thing? American flag. So as we show our loyalty to the United States, so too they did to the Tsar, when the Tsar was nice. And when the Tsar was not nice, you had to show your loyalty even more. Now in Fiddler on the Roof, the revolutionary Jew, Perchik, is sentenced to the Siberian prison camps for his plot against the Tsar. Like Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment, he's shipped off to be married in Siberia, and to, as Raskolnikov does, find a kind of religious absolution, because Perchik is to be married to his bride under a chuppah by a rabbi, because as Tevye tells us, surely there's one or two rabbis in the Gulag too. In reality, yes, Jews participated in attempts to overthrow the Tsars. Hessia Helfman was a Jew. Trotsky was a Jew. Marx was a Jew. Ayn Rand was also a Jew. So we're not confined to any one part of the philosophical or political spectrum. The oppressive laws, though, and the programs of Alexander III drove part of my own family out of corners of the Russian Empire, and possibly some of your families also. So how do we feel when we watch a film or see a musical or do a Purim spiel that shows Jews almost like the mice from Cinderella, sitting on the sidelines, sewing and tailoring and milking our cows, hoping that no one comes to murder us? So much of the modern relationship between American Jews and Israeli Jews is built on the presumption that it is better to die on our feet than to live on our knees. How would Tevye fit in to modern Israel with its shopping malls and Jewish soldiers? The founders of the State of Israel had little love for the shtetl culture of places like Anatevka. And in fact, during the revival of Hebrew as a modern language, Eliezer ben Yehuda, author of the first modern Hebrew dictionary, was raising his son Itamar to be the first native-born speaker of Hebrew. He spoke only Hebrew to his son. Eliezer refused to use any loan words from Yiddish or Arabic or German, believing that they would infect the purity of the Israelite biblical character with memories of diaspora oppression. And one day, while eating breakfast with his son Itamar, Eliezer's breakfast was undersalted. And he wanted to ask his son to pass the salt. Unfortunately, as the author of the modern Hebrew dictionary, he had not yet come up with the entry for salt. And so he ate his food unsalted until he was able to track down an old man who was able to teach him the word for salt. Better to be what Alice Miller called a stop generation. Better to eat your food plain than salted with the tears of Anatevka. To be honest, Tevye and his family seem nothing like the people I see before me tonight, with the exception that we can't get that song out of our heads. You know the one? We got If I Were a Rich Man. What else? Tradition? Nobody? Great. We can't get the song out of our heads. But the people I'm looking at tonight are much closer to the educated, metropolitan, urbane Jews of Alexander II's reign than the villagers of Anatevka during the reign of Alexander III. We tonight here are integrated, tolerant, and inclusive. We are fully enfranchised citizens of the United States. And we, here tonight, could not be farther from Anatevka. Shabbat Shalom. We will continue with Aleinu on page 64. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצון, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ מושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל והארץ מתחת אין עוד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
We remember now those who are no longer with us physically, but whose memories sustain us and encourage us to act correctly and lovingly during our lives. I'll start by reading the names of the yard site list, and I will then ask for additional names. If I read a name of someone you are mourning, you are welcome to repeat it when I call on people in the room. This week we mourn Warren Hoffnung, beloved husband of Marla Silva, and we continue to mourn Martin Cole. The yard sites for this week are Jack Amber, Robert Barker, Jay Bass, Bella Escobasan, Belle Dreyfus, Miriam Feder, Max Gallant, Edith Glickman, Marie Glina, Abraham Goldstein, Irene Gross, Jay Grossman, Althea Horner, Charles Jasson, Anna Kaplan, Bernard Carver, Leonard Kupferman, Norman Lessman, Mark Lipton, Herbert Lockwood, William Marr, Martin Moldowski, Pearl Morris, Tilly Nathan, Charlotte Nelson, Madeleine Newson, Pearl Feder Ostrowski, Marvin Ostrowski, Marvin Perlman, Rodney Petroff, William Price, Bernard Revriby, Ruben Rosenfeld, Jeffrey Rosenthal, Gertrude Rubin, Saul Schacht, Samuel Schultz, Batya Sella, Louis Silberling, Arnold Skulski, Karen Brown Spivak, Harold Storch, Rose Stowe, Loretta Wagner, Albert Wendruck, Maxie Edward Yancey, and Al Yellen. I do apologize if I mispronounced someone's name. Please correct me. And if there's a name of someone you are mourning, please repeat it as I look in your direction. Charles Jason. Apologies. I ask you now to please rise and turn to page 73 as we praise the name of God in the face of loss. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'alama divarach chirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchayetecho beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari vimru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam ulmei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dukucha brichu le'ela minko birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imrumav. Huya se shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru. Amen. You may be seated. Before we conclude with Adon Olam, a few announcements. Firstly, thank you to Carl Cedar for your beautiful music. Thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to our executive director, Lisa Beth Lobenthal, and to Moish, and to our new sound tech, Tyler. Tyler. Thank you very much. And of course, thank you to Juan and his entire team who keep the building spick and span and running like a train. We are going to be, oh yes, and thank you to all of you, our members, without whom none of this would be possible. All of the details of what I'm about to say are findable on our website, but here goes. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. for Torah study, 9:15 a.m. for conservative minyan, January 3rd at 10:30, there is a book club meeting. And then towards the end of January, on the 27th, will be our Kol Isha Shabbat, all female led. And our guest speaker will be Dr. Johanna Noon. Also, not only are all women encouraged to attend, but we are seeking male volunteers to help with the luncheon. Please see the website. Additionally, January 21st, the week before, will be Mitzvah Day. Please bring toiletries and socks for donation. And the first Friday of January, that'll be next week, we're going to not be having the thing with the dinner. We're going to have a service in here at 6 o'clock. And last of all, there's a holiday coming up, and our building will be closed and for New Year's Day and reopen January 2nd at 11 a.m. Now we're going to turn to Adon Olam, and I'm going to ask Carl for a favor. Do you know how to play Old Ang? All right, we're at the end of the year. I'm throwing a curveball to Carl, so thank you for going with it. Most things work to Adon Olam, including Old Ang Zayin. As we're about to get to the end of the year, page 191 or 193, the books have slightly different pagination. Because we're Jews, it couldn't be too easy. 191 or 193. Adon Olam, Hashem alach b'terem kol, Yitzir nivra, L'nasa v'chefso kol, Azai melech shemo nikra, Ve'acharei Kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora, vehu haya vehu ove vehu yeh bertivara, vehu echad ve'en shenin leham shilo lehachbira, beili reshit beili tachlit velo haoz ve'hamizra, vehu eli ve'chai goli ve'tzorchev li beyom sara, vehu nisi umanos li menat kosi beyom ekram, beyad avki ruchi ve'etishan ve'ahira, ve'im ruchi geviati Adonai li velo ira. Let old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind. Let old acquaintance be forgot for old Ang Zayin. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.